The sky over X-07 was not like Earth's. It glowed in soft hues of violet and amber, and the twin moons cast silver streaks across the floating rivers that curved through the bioluminescent forests. The air smelled faintly sweet, like blooming flowers after rain, but it had an unfamiliar sharpness that made human lungs work harder than normal. Lieutenant Mara Ellis adjusted the straps of her utility pack and stepped out of the shuttle. Her boots sank slightly into the soft glowing moss covering the ground. The human colony had been here for 6 months, and every day still felt like stepping into a dream. The mission was simple: make contact with the native species, the Valens. Simple if humans understood what contact meant on this planet. The Valens were unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. They had no words, no sounds that could be translated. Their communication was subtle: light patterns across their skin, tiny movements of limbs, changes in posture that carried meaning only to those who could understand. The humans had tried speech. The Valens had tried silence. Both had failed to meet halfway. Mara walked carefully along the soft forest path. The others in her team were already setting up monitoring stations, leaving her alone with the quiet hum of the forest. She breathed slowly, trying to calm the familiar knot of anxiety in her stomach. She had a gift. Some would call it intuition, others simply patience. But when it came to understanding creatures like the Valens, it was all she had. She remembered the briefing on Kay, the young Valen who had shown unusual curiosity about humans. The reports were brief, almost clinical. Approaches humans more than others. Pauses in observation. Unknown intent. Mara was not worried about intent. She only hoped for connection. As she walked, the soft moss underfoot began to pulse with faint light. A warning or a welcome, she wasn't sure which. Then she saw movement, a figure stepping silently between the glowing trees. Kay. The Valen's form was tall and slender, almost ethereal. Its skin shimmered like liquid silver, and faint streaks of blue ran along its limbs, pulsing in rhythm with its heartbeat. Or so Mara imagined. Kay stopped at a safe distance, tilting its head slightly, observing her with eyes that reflected the soft light of the forest. Mara didn't speak. She didn't need to. She crouched slightly, lowering herself closer to the ground. It was a gesture of peace, and she hoped Kay would understand. Slowly, she extended her hand. Kay moved forward in a careful, flowing motion. The lights along its arms brightened, a cascade of colors that danced from blue to green and back again. Mara had studied this before. Blue meant curiosity, green meant calm. She smiled softly and remained still, letting the colors speak. For several minutes, they simply observed each other, the silence stretching but never uncomfortable. Mara felt a strange connection already forming, as if some invisible thread tied their attention together. Then Kay did something unexpected. It stepped closer and reached out a hand, hovering near Mara's extended palm. The colors along its body shifted rapidly, a complex pattern Mara had never seen before. Her heart raced. Was it trying to communicate? Mara mirrored Kay's movements, holding her hand steady. Slowly, cautiously, their fingers touched. There was no shock, no sensation other than the gentle warmth of the Valen's skin. A warmth that was almost like sunlight filtered through water. And yet, in that touch, Mara felt 1,000 unspoken words: curiosity, trust, a kind of fragile hope. Behind her, the colony's sensors beeped softly, recording every movement, every color change, but Mara barely noticed. Time seemed to slow, the violet and amber light of the sky blending with the glow of the forest, and all that existed was the quiet connection between human and Valen. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Mara didn't know. Kay finally withdrew its hand, stepping back, but not without leaving a lingering sense of closeness. Its colors pulsed slowly now, almost like a heartbeat syncing with hers. Mara exhaled, a laugh of relief escaping her lips. No words had been spoken, yet she knew this first meeting had been a success. It was more than success. It was a beginning. Later, Mara walked back to the colony, the forest around her alive with the soft hum of the planet. She glanced up at the twin moons and felt a surge of hope. If humans could learn to communicate with the Valens without words, maybe they could learn to understand much more than alien creatures. Maybe they could understand each other better too. Her team greeted her at the shuttle bay. Find anything? One of them asked, glancing at her equipment. Mara shook her head, smiling. Something. More than words could ever tell. Over the next few days, Mara returned to the forest again and again. Each meeting with Kay was different. Sometimes Kay would mimic her movements, a playful dance of gestures and pulses of color. Other times it would lead her along hidden paths, revealing parts of the forest that humans had not yet seen. Each interaction was a lesson in patience and observation. One morning, Mara noticed a subtle shift. Kay's colors lingered on patterns she had come to recognize as affection. It stayed close, not touching, but near enough that Mara could feel the warmth of its presence. And Mara found herself responding, leaning into the quiet companionship, smiling even when no one else was watching. The other humans began to notice changes too. Where once the colony had been tense around the Valens, there was now a sense of calm. Mara's ability to interpret Kay's subtle signals had a ripple effect. Teams could coordinate more smoothly. Tensions over misunderstandings faded. Colonel Hayes, the colony's leader, came to watch one of the meetings. He observed Mara and Kay standing together in the glowing forest, no words passing between them, and finally shook his head in disbelief. "I don't understand it," he said. "I've been here 6 months, and these creatures never reacted this way. How do you do it?" Mara smiled softly, watching the light pulse along Kay's arms. "They don't need words," she said. "Their silence. It's already speaking." As the days passed, Mara realized that her connection with Kay was changing her. She became more aware of subtleties in her own team, noticing emotions that hadn't been voiced, sensing tensions before they erupted. In a way, the Valens were teaching her humanity back to herself, how to feel, how to understand, how to connect. One evening, she found herself sitting on the ridge above the floating rivers, Kay beside her. The Valen's light shimmered softly in the twilight, the same rhythm as Mara's heartbeat. She didn't speak, and Kay didn't either. It wasn't necessary. Somehow, in that silence, Mara felt something stronger than words could ever convey. Trust, respect. An unspoken bond forming between two beings from entirely different worlds. And deep beneath it all, something tender and unshakable. The forest whispered in its alien way. The rivers glowed below, and the twin moons rose higher in the sky. Mara and Kay sat together, learning each other's rhythms, understanding that communication was not always about words. Sometimes the most important messages were carried in silence, and in that silence, love had already begun to grow. Days passed on XO7, and the human colony began to feel less like strangers in an alien world, and more like explorers learning a new way of life. Mara Ellis spent most of her time with Kay, walking through the glowing forests, following the winding, floating rivers, and observing the small, delicate creatures that moved beneath the luminous canopy. Each day she learned something new, not only about Kay, but about herself. The Valens had a rhythm to their lives that humans could barely follow at first. Their movements were slow, precise, and flowing, almost like dancing in the air. Their skin glowed with colors that shifted in patterns Mara had begun to understand. Blue meant curiosity, green meant calm, orange meant alertness, and lately she noticed a soft pink pulse whenever Kay stayed near her for a long time. It was subtle, almost impossible to see unless one paid attention. But Mara saw it. Her connection with Kay grew stronger with every silent meeting. One morning, as the twin moons cast a pale light over the floating rivers, Mara found Kay waiting at the edge of a glowing moss field. The Valen's colors flickered in complex sequences, more intricate than she had seen before. Mara crouched in greeting, letting her hands rest on the soft moss. Slowly, Kay approached and extended its hand. Their fingers touched lightly, and the warmth that spread through her chest was almost unbearable in its simplicity. "You're early today," she whispered. Though she knew Kay would not hear, she spoke more to herself than to anyone. Kay's colors pulsed brighter, almost like laughter. Mara smiled, her heart feeling lighter than it had in months. But life on XO7 was not always calm. The colony faced challenges daily. Equipment sometimes failed, storms rolled through the forest without warning, and the humans struggled to understand the alien ecosystem. Some of the team wanted to exploit the glowing moss for energy. Others wanted to push further into the forest without concern for the Valen's feelings. Mara felt a quiet tension building. She had learned that the Valens were sensitive, not only to human presence but to human intent. Kay sensed it too. When Mara walked through the camp, she noticed Kay following at a distance, colors dimming in warning whenever humans argued too loudly or made hasty decisions. It was during one of these days that disaster struck. A sudden tremor shook the colony. Equipment toppled and the ground beneath the floating rivers cracked. A section of the colony's energy dome collapsed. Panic spread quickly among the humans. Mara's first thought was of the people, but then she remembered the Vaylons. Some were near the forests, caught in areas now at risk of collapse. She needed to act fast. She ran toward the forest, her boots kicking up the glowing moss. Kay appeared, almost like a shadow, moving in perfect synchronization with her steps. The Vaylons' colors flickered urgently, red for danger, bright and impossible to ignore. Mara understood immediately. Without words, they moved together. Kay led her through paths Mara had never seen, over roots and small cliffs, through dense trees, always guiding, always watching. When a section of the ground gave way, Mara barely jumped back in time. Kay hovered near her, its body pulsing in reassurance. They reached the group of Vaylons just as a small quake rattled the forest. Mara motioned toward safety, using simple gestures. Kay mirrored her, extending its arms and guiding the others. The humans who had followed saw the incredible sight. A Vaylon, communicating entirely without words, leading both humans and Vaylons to safety. When the tremors finally stopped, Mara turned to Kay. Their eyes met. No words were exchanged, but Mara felt something profound. Kay had trusted her and she had trusted it. Together they had saved lives. After the rescue, the colony gathered to assess the damage. Equipment could be repaired and no one had been hurt, but Mara's bond with Kay had become something undeniable. The other humans, even those skeptical of the Vaylons, began to notice that Mara's approach was different. She didn't try to dominate or control. She listened, watched, and acted in sync with the creatures around her. That evening, Mara returned to the glowing rivers with Kay. The Vaylons' colors softened to a gentle pink, a pattern Mara had come to recognize as affection and calm. She sat beside it, letting the light of the forest wash over them both. "You know," she whispered, "you're teaching me more than I ever imagined." Kay responded with a series of delicate pulses, moving its fingers in intricate patterns. Mara's heart swelled. She understood. It wasn't just communication. It was connection. A meeting of minds and hearts without the need for speech. Over the next few days, Mara began to notice changes within herself. She could anticipate the moods of her team before they spoke. She could sense the tension of the colony and calm it with quiet gestures, much like Kay had taught her. The humans were learning from the Vaylons, whether they realized it or not. Then one afternoon, Mara faced her greatest challenge yet. A young researcher had wandered too close to a river that floated higher than the surrounding forest, curious about a glowing plant. The ground beneath her feet began to shift. Mara ran, heart pounding, and reached her just as the soil gave way. She grabbed the researcher's hand, pulling her to safety. Kay appeared beside her in an instant, its body a cascade of vibrant blues and greens, signaling relief and encouragement. Mara realized that the silent connection she had with Kay wasn't just for them. It was a bridge for everyone. Together, human and Vaylon could navigate the dangers of XO7. That night, as the twin moons rose over the glowing rivers, Mara sat with Kay again. The Vaylon moved closer, resting its hand against hers. No words were needed. They understood each other completely, their silence stronger than any speech. The colony was beginning to see the truth Mara had always known. Humanity was not just about survival or technology. It was about heart, empathy, and the ability to connect even in worlds that seemed impossible to understand. The Vaylons were teaching them that in their own quiet way. Mara smiled softly. "You don't need words, do you?" she whispered. Kay responded with a gentle pulse of pink light. In that moment, Mara understood something she had never fully realized before. Love and trust did not require speech. They required attention, presence, and the courage to see another being as an equal. She had found that courage in Kay, and she felt it grow stronger with each passing day. The following weeks were filled with lessons of silent communication. Mara learned to read subtle shifts in Kay's posture, tiny flickers of light that conveyed meaning beyond any words. Kay learned to understand Mara's moods and intentions, responding with colors and movements that reassured her or guided her through difficult terrain. One morning, Mara noticed a group of Valons observing her from a distance. They mirrored the patterns she and Kay had developed, slowly adopting the silent gestures and movements that had become their own language. Mara realized that something extraordinary was happening. The Valons were beginning to teach the humans, not through words, but through example, through shared understanding. Colonel Hayes came to watch one of their sessions. He observed Mara and Kay moving through the forest, guiding each other without a single word. "I still don't understand it," he admitted. "But it works. You've created something we've never seen before." Mara nodded. "It's not about understanding everything," she said softly. "It's about noticing, listening, and trusting. The rest comes naturally." As night fell, Mara and Kay returned to their usual spot by the floating rivers. The forest glowed softly around them, and the twin moons cast silver light across the water. Mara rested her hand on Kay's, and Kay responded with a gentle pulse. Their connection had grown beyond curiosity. It had become friendship, trust, and something deeper, something that didn't need words to exist. And in that quiet companionship, Mara realized the greatest lesson of all. Sometimes, silence spoke louder than any language. The colony continued to thrive, guided by the silent understanding between human and Valon. Mara and Kay became a symbol of that connection, showing that empathy and cooperation could bridge even the greatest divides. And as Mara sat with Kay, watching the rivers shimmer beneath the twin moons, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was only the beginning. Their bond would shape not only the future of the colony, but the understanding between two very different worlds. The forest whispered around them. The rivers glowed beneath the moonlight, and Mara felt a warmth she had never known. In silence, in presence, and in shared understanding, love had already begun to bloom. The colony on XO7 had grown stronger in the months since Mara and Kay had first met. Humans and Valons moved among each other with a newfound understanding, a silent harmony that few outside the colony could imagine. Mara often thought of how strange it was that a world so alien could feel, in some ways, more like home than Earth ever had. But peace is always fragile, and the quiet balance of the colony was about to be tested. One morning, an alert blared across the settlement. A human expedition not part of the colony had arrived in orbit. Mara watched the communications with unease. The newcomers were from a corporate faction that sought to exploit XO7's glowing moss and rare minerals. They did not care about the Valons, the delicate forests, or the floating rivers. Their intentions were clear. Take what they wanted, no matter the cost. Mara felt a chill run down her spine. She glanced at Kay, who was standing beside her, observing the skies above with calm focus. The Valon's colors pulsed a steady green, but Mara could sense tension beneath the surface. Kay knew something was coming, even if humans had not yet seen it. Colonel Hayes called a meeting. "We need a plan," he said. "We cannot allow them to take what's ours or theirs. We need to stop them, but without provoking a conflict, we cannot win." Mara stepped forward. "We don't need weapons. Not yet. Kay and I can help. We've learned to move and act together silently. We can guide the colony through the forest in ways they won't expect. They won't understand this world like we do." The room was silent for a moment, then Hayes nodded slowly. "Do it, but be careful. We don't know what they're capable of." That night, Mara and Kay moved through the forest, scouting the area near the landing zone. Kay's body glowed in faint pulses, signaling the safest paths and warning of obstacles that humans could not perceive. Mara followed, her senses aligned with the Valon's guidance. Together they became a single unit, moving through the forest as though it had always belonged to them. At dawn, the corporate team attempted to land near the colony. Their shuttles kicked up clouds of glowing moss, damaging small sections of the forest. Mara and Kay were already in position. Through subtle gestures and flashes of color, Kay guided Mara and the rest of the colony to positions that blocked access routes naturally, using the forest itself as a barrier. The corporate team was confused. Their scanners showed no signs of organized resistance, yet every attempt to move closer to the colony was met with obstacles: fallen trees, unstable ground, and strange patterns in the glowing moss that seemed almost intentional. Mara stayed calm. She understood that this was not a fight to win with force. It was a fight to show that understanding, strategy, and respect could triumph where weapons might fail. Kay moved silently beside her, its light flickering rapidly as it coordinated the silent defense. The Valons emerged from the shadows. guiding humans who had once been hesitant into positions that protected the colony without confrontation. Everyone moved as one, human and Veylan, intuition and empathy guiding them. By midday, the corporate team realized something was wrong. Their instruments failed to detect life accurately, their drones malfunctioned over the unpredictable terrain, and every path they tried seemed to close off. Frustration grew among them, but Mara did not feel fear. She felt a deep trust in Kay and the quiet bond they shared. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, the corporate team finally called a retreat. Mara and Kay watched from the ridge above the floating rivers as the shuttles lifted off, leaving the colony and the forest untouched. Kay's color softened to gentle greens and pinks, and Mara felt her chest swell with relief and pride. Later, the colony celebrated quietly. There was no shouting or loud music. The humans had learned something more valuable than victory. They had learned to see, to notice, and to act with patience and understanding. Mara and Kay had shown them that words were not always needed, and that cooperation could be stronger than force. That evening, Mara walked to the riverbank where she and Kay often met. The forest glowed softly, reflecting off the still water. Kay approached, moving closer than usual, its skin pulsing softly against the darkening sky. Mara sat beside it, her hand brushing against its delicate form. "You were amazing today," she whispered, though Kay did not hear. Still, it responded, a gentle pulse that conveyed understanding. Mara smiled. "I couldn't have done it without you." Kay tilted its head, its colors shifting in patterns Mara had learned to interpret as affection and gratitude. No words were needed. Mara realized once again that their bond was deeper than speech, deeper than thought itself. It was a meeting of hearts. Over the following weeks, the colony flourished. Humans and Veylans moved together in harmony, exploring the forests, studying the floating rivers, and learning from one another. The silent language Mara and Kay had developed spread to others. Slowly, the humans began to notice subtle cues in each other, gestures, expressions and tones that had previously gone unnoticed. One afternoon, Mara and Kay sat on the ridge above the glowing rivers, watching the twin moons rise. Mara rested her head lightly on Kay's shoulder. The Veylan responded with a soft pulse, and Mara felt a sense of peace she had never known on Earth or anywhere else. "You know," she said softly, "we don't need words. Not for this. Not for any of this." Kay shifted closer, a slow, deliberate movement that mirrored her own. Their hands touched again, fingers brushing lightly. It was not romance in the way humans usually understood it. It was connection, trust, love without barriers or expectation, a bond that transcended species, words, and even worlds. The colony gathered nearby to celebrate another day of success. Mara watched her people move and work together with the Veylans, a quiet smile on her face. They were learning that strength was not always measured by weapons or technology. Sometimes, the greatest strength came from understanding, empathy, and courage, the courage to trust without speaking, to act without commanding, to love without needing to explain. Night fell, and Mara and Kay remained on the ridge. The glowing rivers below shimmered under the moons. The forest hummed softly with life, and the stars above sparkled in silent acknowledgement. Mara leaned back against Kay, feeling the gentle warmth that always accompanied their presence. In that moment, she understood everything. All the struggles, all the lessons, all the silent hours in the glowing forest they had led here. Humanity had survived and thrived not through dominance or power, but through heart, and Kay had been there every step of the way, showing her that sometimes silence spoke louder than any words could. As the moons climbed higher, Mara closed her eyes, letting the cool night air wash over her. Kay's soft pulses reflected her own heartbeat. They didn't need words. Their silence had already spoken everything that mattered: trust, courage, connection, and love. The forest, the rivers, the colony, and the twin moons all seemed to agree. This was the beginning of something lasting, something beyond language, something that would define the future of XO7 and the humans who had chosen to live in harmony with it. And Mara knew, deep in her heart, that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, silent, patient, and unbreakably connected, because sometimes love did not need words. It only needed presence.